right. So Kelli, thank you so much for participating in our YouTube channel, our community of practice channel on here on YouTube. And on behalf of SETSI, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and really appreciate your leadership today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. So as always, we begin by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So if you can please do us the honors by introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us about your remarkable work.
Sure. So my name's Kelli Stevens. My pronouns are she, her. I'm calling in today from Calgary, or what was known to the Blackfoot people, is known to the Blackfoot people as Mokinstis, which means elbow. It's called that because it's Calgary and Mokinstis are situated on Treaty 7 where two rivers meet and make an elbow. I'm not originally from here, although I've lived here for almost 25 years. I grew up in a place in northern Alberta, pretty remote from anywhere else and pretty small, about 2,000 people. And if we wanted to do anything, we needed to do it ourselves. So it was the kind of place where people had to look out for each other. There weren't a lot of formal services and supports, especially back then. It's a little different now. And a lot of people weren't originally from there. So people had traveled there usually for work reasons and didn't have like family-based supports in lots of cases. So we had to build our own kind of found family and find connections and help each other do things. And like I say, anything we wanted for the town had to be built and stewarded ourselves. And I think I say that when I talk about any of my work in social impact, because it felt a little different to arrive in an urban environment and have that not necessarily be the case. And I feel that in my work, I often go back to what I learned as a kid in a place where everybody kind of looked out for each other in a little bit of a different way than what I experience now. From there, I'll jump forward in time and talk about my work over the last decade or so. Has mostly been in a few different roles focused on, whether the employers would say this or not, what has meant for me is they've been focused on finding ways for multiple sectors to work together. So I have this little soapbox rant where I talk about the things that are most important to me. They usually come back to some way of having interdisciplinary or different kinds of sectors working together. I think the kinds of challenges we see socially and environmentally today are not going to be solved by any one kind of sector. So business doesn't have all the answers. Charities and nonprofits don't have all the answers. Academia doesn't have all the answers. Government doesn't have all the answers. And I've been really blessed to have worked in all of those sectors and subsectors in among them. And I find that when things are most successful, most sustainable, it's because people have chipped in from these different backgrounds and have come to work together and realized that they each offer something that the others may not. And so I've found a path in kind of making what I hope is my life's work be focused on how to bring people together in that kind of way.
Awesome. I was so engulfed to what you were saying. That's great. Awesome. Love that. Love that. Is your personal mission and vision, and what inspires you about the work you do?
My personal vision and mission have shifted so much, and sometimes like I'm not going to be able to give you one because it feels like it probably should be one, but it feels like I shift them based on where I am or what is happening in the world and what I'm learning about myself. So I think like maybe that's the essence of any vision or mission statement is I don't think that we can change big things in systems, which I would love to see happen without being able to change ourselves and our relationships with each other. And that, as much as I would like to imagine that all the things that are challenging about my life or my work, or like as you expand the different circles out to be all of society, I don't, I would love to think that the problems are all outside of me, but I know that there are some things that I like desperately need to change and evolve about myself. And so doing the inner work that supports us to do the outer work is, I think, a crucial thing about wherever I land. And when I say that the reason I might shift and change is I've been in settings where I would have a really concrete, tangible mission and vision. But I've also learned the hard way through various experiences that I have a personality that can get so intent on trying to achieve that vision. And I'm quite good at seeing a set of steps that can create a to-do list to get to a vision. But I get so focused on doing that that I forget sometimes or deprioritize caring. And so then I'm a person who might be able to achieve a lot and get through a to-do list, but have actually been kind of a jerk to people along the way, not intentionally, but because I like get so intent on like this, all these different steps that I forget that people and others are not necessarily on my same agenda, and they've got all the kinds of things going on in their lives that make life difficult and remarkable and amazing, but those kinds of things get in the way sometimes of goals. And I think bringing it back, what I've had to learn is bringing it back to being very relationship focused and thinking about like what pushes me to like do instead of how do I be the how do I be the human being and not the human doing that I imagine? How do I embody the work that I imagine and believe is important? It's no good if I can fulfill a whole bunch of steps toward it without also being able to be the kind of person that I imagine wanting others to be. It's a very long-winded and rambly kind of way that says, I think, and it's going to be different for each person, but I think being able to come back to the inner work that we each need to do to get to an outer workplace of sustainably having the kind of impact we hope to have, that's especially in the last several years become really important to me. In terms of what inspires me, um, just like everyone has their own unique set of things that they struggle with personally and on that inner work level, everyone also has so many different ideas and sets of learning that drive them. And I think what inspires me is being able to see all the different ideas that people bring to new models. Like when I think about social finance, for example, and to some those are not new. There's also the reconfiguring of old models into something that feels new. I think I've been lucky to be exposed to all different kinds of ideas and ways of thinking about the future that I wouldn't have come up with on my own. What I think my contribution to that is to be able to plot a path toward somebody's vision and help people achieve it. I've enjoyed doing that and seen some success in it, notwithstanding the part about getting too bent on the to-do list itself. But yeah, those things inspire me. I love being around people with ideas that can like state a vision for something entirely new that we don't have now, or that we're not, or that's like just a little bit adjacent and could be new. And there's so much of that in these last several years. I think for all of its faults and problems, the pandemic broke open some of those. I think there is daylight being put on some of these new ideas. I think there's a flip side to that story, but we'll get into that because I think you're going to ask me about challenges. But yeah, particularly with young people, the way they are coming forward and sharing a different kind of vision and seeing multiple motivations at once, social alongside financial, for example. There's so much that we can do with the energy and the ideas that come from those places.
Exactly. So yeah, let's jump right into it. What are the challenges and barriers that you face, and
Yeah.
how have you overcome them? Or yeah.
Sorry, like, so excited to talk about challenge. If the inspiration is the new models or the reconfiguration of old models, then the challenge is that I often feel like we're not moving fast enough. Um, and I think in terms of overcoming that challenge, I don't like my answer, partly because of what I just shared about my own inclination toward doing. But where I get the most support when I feel like things aren't going quickly enough, is the natural world. So I think learning from the land has been so important to me, and I've been really fortunate to have, like I say, um, an upbringing in a very foresty kind of place, but also in more recent years, Indigenous colleagues that have validated and confirmed that what I felt in nature as a kid, goes back to the dawn of people, and the land is a real teacher. I think you can't see it, but there's a little reminder to my left that says, learn from nature, her secret is patience. Now, I think I feel like I have to offer a caveat that says, I don't think we can change society and systems as slowly as it might take to create a new mountain. I don't think we can be that patient. And I'm not trying to use the land and nature as a way of letting us ourselves off the hook from doing what needs to be done. But I think being out in the natural world reminds me of the importance of being humble. One of the challenges I think that when I say things don't go fast enough, I suspect that, others' personal agendas and egos get in the way, mine included sometimes. And I think what nature offers me is that reminder that we are so small. Our little human selves and all of our big worries and our big anxieties are so, so tiny. And, what has been here and stood and, run through in the case of water, it's been so much longer and is so much just bigger than us. I've going to deviate for a second and say that I heard or read a study several years ago about the way people were with each other in environments where, like particularly urban environments, where they couldn't see stars, compared to how people behave with each other when they're in environments where they can see the night sky. And there's probably no way of checking the causation versus correlation on that, but I think about it every time when I have a clear view of the galaxies that show like how just tiny I am, and how reminds me how that fact needs to play into my work and into my rushing and into the feeling of the need for constant production that many of us have. I think that's one of the ways I've been trying to overcome the challenge, maybe not the challenge itself of slowness and pushback, but perhaps the burnout that comes with that. I mean, I think one of the things when I say things don't go fast enough, I think that can very easily be a contributor to burnout in this field. And one way that I know my former and current colleagues in various pieces of work have overcome that barrier is through remembering that the land has a lot to teach us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Powerful. So, what are there any like key priorities you want to amplify in your work right now?
Yeah, I
Anything current?
think the biggest one, and it's not a SMART goal. It's not a specific, measurable, actionable one necessarily, but I think my main priority right now is to figure out the balance of pushing on the status quo. This relates to my previous answer, while also balancing that with some amount of calling in. With all the kind of privilege that I have, from, how I present outwardly, but other things beside, I think there's something about that positionality that requires me to be somebody who can do more calling in and put myself in the middle of different kinds of viewpoints. I have really enjoyed the parts of my career where my colleagues and I have been successful about by pushing something or going around authorities and forces and systems to get something done. And that worked really well for a while. Um, in one example I'm thinking of, it worked for a couple of decades. And what I'm learning belatedly and with some regret is that it doesn't make those changes resilient. So there needs, like, if pushing can get something done or going around or finding a new path, great, I'm still all for that. But I'm trying to figure out as a priority what also needs to be done to have those changes land well and exist in a way in a system or an organization or a structure where people don't feel threatened later about the change, so that you don't get that massive pendulum swing that seems to happen when a regime or an set of authorities change.
That's right. Very, very true. So let me ask you, how do you feel about the future of social impact in Canada?
I saw this question and I sat with it for the absolute longest of any of the questions I knew were coming my way. It felt like my brain was cracking open a little. I think the simple answer is I feel uncertain about it, but these days I'm feeling uncertain about a lot of future-oriented questions. What I came, what it came down to for me is, what's the motivation about the future, like that will inform the future of social impact? So my longer answer beyond the uncertainty is, if the motivation towards social impact is that it's the right thing to do, it's the values aligned thing to do, I think for folks that can take us a long way, which makes the future positive. On the other hand, I think we see, as people's jobs are being threatened, I think about what's happening in the US and elsewhere, even the best person who's wants to do what they believe is the right thing, they might still have a family to look after. That might still be their priority. They might feel locked into a position that they feel they need to preserve. And so then perhaps if the threat is that they could lose their livelihood by doing X, then maybe they go along with Y, and perhaps the future of social impact becomes less resilient, less certain, if the motivation is doing the right thing. If the motivation towards social impact is that it's kind of a bolt-on or an evolution to capitalism, then, and the idea that social impact ways of working can make people money, that, that's more transactional, and I think perhaps less resilient to a strong future. I think we're seeing that with some of the backlash and the pullout. The things that should make companies, for example, money in socially impactful ways, seem to be disappearing or going underground or being renamed in ways that make me wonder about the future. If the motivation is something that bends toward reciprocity or mutual aid, that gives me the most hope for the future of social impact. I think if somebody can serve their own self-interest while also serving, for example, their neighbors, literal or metaphorical neighbors, then, and vice versa, that feels like the most resilient, sustainable social impact future to me. And so then it gets my mind going back to the priority question. How do we get to that balance of calling in and helping people see that there's mutual interest, reasons for doing social impact for a long time to come, rather than just the transactional ones, or rather than, this makes me sad to say, rather than the morally righteous reasons for doing it, which don't seem to land well for everyone. I think that would be the most positive way of thinking about the future of social impact.
I agree. And it's like, I always say we are playing our role, but it's like we know that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it's going to be ongoing into it's generational passing of the baton, but we see that in Gen Z right now, they're holding us accountable for our actions.
Mhm.
There's no room there. So, but that's good. It'll keep us on our toes, do hold ourselves accountable to change, and so that we can make it a little bit more easier, at least build that foundation, even if it's the first level,
Yeah.
of a 20,000-foot building. At least we get to the
Yeah.
foundation, we can pass the baton, and they keep going until that change
And
is made.
absolutely. And some moments, some years, maybe that thing that they do isn't even growing. It might just be it might just be maintaining the foundation. And previous
Mm,
versions of me would have been so horrified to hear me say that because well, if you're not building on it, what? But if you're sustaining something in ways that outside forces aren't causing it to crumble. I think we actually need to get better at celebrating that in our work and
so true.
feeling like that itself is an accomplishment.
So
Um,
true.
yeah, like
Yeah. I like that.
there's so
I
much.
like that. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I was going to say this, but I feel like where you and I are right now lends itself to the comment. There's a lot of comments about win right now. I mean, you heard it with the new prime minister talking about Canada will win. You hear it in business about winning. I don't love, am I going to use the word hate? Yeah, I think I will. I hate the scarcity mindset that accompanies a win-lose when,
Yeah.
like, for example, international trade. It should be wins for many people. Like there shouldn't need to be a loser. The whole point of trading, as I understand its history, was that everyone involved got something out of it. And
Hmm.
yeah, and that's to say nothing of all the places I could take this sidetrack about, it's not just about people and there's all kinds of well-being to consider that go beyond our human relations. But there's something about the win comments floating around right now that imply somebody has to lose. And I realize I sound naive and like airy-fairy when I say I'm not sure we have to imagine so many losers to be able to win at our work.
Yeah. That's so true. I love how you're thinking there. That is so key and so pivotal because it's always going to be like, oh, it's a race, it's a game, it's a this. Some say it is a game, but that's a whole other
Yeah.
story. But
Well,
yeah,
and like
it
there are cases where you want to win, or there's cases where somebody
for
is,
sure.
a very obvious aggressor, and it's probably not the move to say to them, like, let's all just win together. But maybe there's other ways, like this is where I'm getting at with the mutual interest thing. Maybe there's other ways of showing and demonstrating that we can actually win together.
Hmm. 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 Absolutely. Awesome. So, okay, so I asked you that one. So, okay. So, what is if you were to summarize, like, what's your ultimate goal and what success look like for you and colleagues?
Well, you actually gave it a moment ago. You were talking about generations, and my ultimate goal always come back to what I've learned again from Indigenous colleagues about seven generations thinking and what we can leave for future generations to be able to make their lives well in whatever ways that looks like for them, and with a solid dose of considering our other relations too, like the concept of all our relations are not only human. Yeah, anything I have as a big picture life goal come back to what I learned from Indigenous folks in my life about seven generations and all our relations.
Amazing. Wow. Well, Kelly, it's been so inspirational. I love how your mind works, and that's why collaborating with yourself and Setsi and we really try and make that impact, and as well as other organizations to come on board and let's be the change. That's what this is all about. Social justice, social finance, this everything encompasses, and at the end, it's about the outcome. Because that's really what it's about. What is the outcome of all of this? When we put our heart in it, when we put our head in it, when we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this, what is the outcome? You know, is this something that's going to be sustainable? Is it really hitting all the, you know, the SDG goals, let's say, and you know, really get to that side of I'm going to say that balance, you know, to really have that balance of fair justice, equality, and peace. And I think that that's something that is it's something that it's deserved, and it is a human right, you know, at the end of the day. Yeah, yeah. So my last question is, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to actions at this time?
It's interesting that you mentioned the SDGs because sometimes I talk about how my favorite SDG is 17. Like other people I know have, very strong callings toward working in, gender, health, water. But I've always been a big fan of 17, which I think is the networks and the infrastructure needed to make all the rest of them work. I don't talk as much about that anymore because I feel like it's kind of cool and trendy to be more critical of the SDGs, especially as 2030 approaches. But yeah, I'm a big believer, like I said at the start, in multi-sector approaches. And so I guess my closing thought is just that I've been lucky to hold positions, and I think will again and do to be able to convene people across sectors to be able to learn from each other and build relationships together. I'm lucky right now to be working with some post-secondary students who would love to learn from and with social impact organizations. And so if anyone wants to do that together, I would love to connect with you. It doesn't have to be geographically close, but I'd love for folks to get in touch. And I'm pretty good about checking LinkedIn, so people can connect with me there.
Awesome. We appreciate you so much. We thank you so much for taking the time today. And I know a lot of people will be inspired by the work that you do. And this is definitely not a goodbye. It's a see you later, because we'll definitely be collaborating, I'm sure, in future endeavors. So once again, on behalf of SETSI, we thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So we will close the way that we began by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So we'll be in touch, Kelly. We thank you so much.
Thank you.